everybody, welcome back. Today we're making some smoked ossobuco with Parmesan and pistachio risotto. Let's get going. So we have some ossobuco here, and this is the cut from the shank. So this is the forearm, or sometimes hind leg, typically the forearm. And you can see here the bone has marrow in it, which is, that's really awesome. That's gonna give it a lot of flavor, and that's great to eat, especially spread it on some toast after it's on the smoker. That's gonna be really, really good. So what I wanna do is I wanna sear this lightly, just lightly in a pan, just to kind of set the shape, not to really give it a ton of caramelization because it'll dry out during that smoking process that we're gonna do. So I just wanna get this seared a little bit. So I'm gonna start with some salt and pepper. So I'm gonna start with some salt and pepper. Put a decent amount on here. This is a larger cut of meat. I'm gonna flip this now. Notice how I'm not touching the container once again. So you wanna get this all coated up very nicely. Don't be shy with it. This is just sea salt and black pepper. Now typically ossobuco is a winter dish. You would have this over risotto or over polenta, and the winter would be very, very heavy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna smoke this, and we're gonna rub it down in some garlic paste that we made the other day with some butter confit garlic and a little bit of basil and Parmesan and pepperoncini peppers. This is gonna be really, really good. But this is gonna make this so it's not as heavy as it would be if it was braised and served with polenta or a risotto that was heavy on the Parmesan. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do here, I have a pan ripping hot with a little bit of oil in it. You don't want too much oil, you wanna lay this down in the pan away from you. Wisps of smoke is exactly what we wanna see. That's how you can tell your oil is hot enough. Now if you put too much oil, you're gonna be frying this, and that's not what you wanna do. We want a nice sear on this. So the best way to do that, a really, really hot pan, get a quick sear on it, about 2 minutes on each side, maybe a little less, a little bit of color, and we're gonna take it off and rub it down with our garlic. Okay, so been on about 2-3 minutes now. I'm gonna flip this, look at that nice caramelization on the meat. And beautiful, nice sear. Not too heavy, because we are gonna put this on the smoker. So back on for about 2 minutes on the inside, and then onto the smoker. Now that we've done on both sides, just want to touch it lightly on the edges of each one. You can kind of go like this and set it up against each other. Hold it for like 45 seconds or so, and the pan's hot enough to just kind of seal everything off. See, that's all I really need. Just like that. Really, really hot pan will work very well for you. Okay, so now we've seared our ossobuco. I have the roasted garlic paste, and I've added about a teaspoon of tomato paste. It's gonna give it a little bit of flavor and some nice color. Coming out there. Mix it up really nicely until it's all homogenized, nice little pink hue to it, red hue to it. And I'm gonna crust up, rub this all over our ossobuco. Not gonna be a pretty process, but it will be rewarding in the end. You don't want really a lot of buildup of crust, you just want it all over it. This, you can do a good amount on the top part of it, and then just hit the bottom. It will all come off, or not come off, but reduce as this smokes. So not to worry. That's why I reserved a little bit, because you can put some more if you want when you go to flip. All right, there we are. Nice and beautiful. And we're gonna go onto the smoker at 225 degrees for about 2.5 to 3 hours, and then we're gonna wrap. Here we go. Onto the risotto. Now here I have about a cup, 7.7 ounces of black rice. Now black rice is from all over Asia. It originated in China about 10,000 years ago from what most sources say, and it is technically purple. It's so high in anthocyanin that it has the appearance of being black. But when this is cooked, this is going to take on more of a dark purple color. Now it can be glutinous, it can be different sized grains. This happens to be an organic medium grain, which is perfect for risotto, short to medium grain rice. That's, you know, you have your arborio and carnaroli. Over in Italy, typically those are the two most popular ones they use, and the short to medium grain rices are usually the best for risotto. So in this case, most people will traditionally cook the onions first. The way I was taught by somebody named Chef Vinoli, and he was from Italy, and his risotto was really, really good. So I'm gonna pass that on to you now with this technique. And this technique involves usually a clean pan that has nothing in it at all. Our pan here has a good amount of the veal bits in it, which is some flavor that I would like in this risotto. Now typically it would be a clean dry pan with nothing in it. I've wiped the oil out of this pan, so essentially what we're going to be doing is toasting this rice. So I'm going to pour this rice in this pan. It's on a very, very, very low temperature. It's going to take about 25 minutes to toast this rice properly. And you're going to look for, you know, in white rice, you would obviously look for it to become extremely white and vibrant white. In this. Now, 25 minutes for this rice. Very, very low heat. Keep stirring it. Typically, like I said, this would be in a dry pan with nothing. We're just using the rice here to kind of soak up these bits of the ossobuco, which is going to be flavor for our rice. And we're not worried about keeping this a beautiful white because it's black rice to begin with. So it's not even going to matter. You're not going to see it. So 25 minutes, and we'll see you in a second. Okay, so here we have 4 ounces of roasted pistachios ground up, very, very fine, and about a teaspoon of basil paste. It's really for some flavor and a little bit of color. They're already salted, so I'm gonna add a splash of Chardonnay wine, about an ounce, and then water. About 8 ounces of water. And we're gonna take our immersion blender and blend this out. Okay. Nice balance, really good. Now, we should probably strain this. Okay, so we're gonna strain this, just so we don't get any of those heavy pieces of pistachio in the risotto. I want it nice and smooth. Let that drain out. get rid of this. Okay, and so reserve this to the side. Very good. Okay, so now I have our rice here. See, it has a nice shine to it, and that's because when you toast rice like this, it converts the starches and sugars, and you get that nice shine to the outside of it. Again, all the oil was taken out of this pan. So now I'm going to remove the rice, sweat down the onion very gently, and then add the rice back. Okay, so we've got our onions sweated out now here, nice and tender, and we're going to add our rice back. All right, rice in, do a little salt and pepper. Season as you go, season throughout, builds complexity in your dish. So we're going to mix this up. Put this back on the stove for just a second to heat the rice back up. So you'll see here now that the rice has warmed back up, the onions have started to take on a almost purple hue to them, and that's from the black rice. So now that this is hot, we're going to add 4 ounces of white wine. Okay, I'm gonna put this back on the stove and let the rice soak up all that white wine. So now we have our rice here that has soaked up our wine. Our onions are sweated down. The rice was beautifully toasted before we did any of this. Again, the procedure is dry pan, toast the rice for 25 minutes till it becomes an opaque white or clear white color. What this does is converts the starches and sugars and creates a nice outer shell on our rice, which enables us to be able to have individual grains when we have our risotto. The biggest thing when it comes to risotto is every single grain of rice should be whole, intact, and not broken. That's one of the biggest things with risotto. So the step we're at now, we are right before we add our stock. Now your stock must be hot. You never, ever want to add cold stock to your risotto because you have 2 differences in temperature. That's going to be a huge problem because you're going to allow more starch to leach out too early in the process. And what we really want is that starch to stay inside the grain and be leached out once we do our mounting process at the end with the butter and the cheese. So onto the stove, we're going to start adding our chicken stock now. Here we've got our rice, a rubber spatula here. We'll start adding our stock. Our stock is boiling. That's what you should hear when you pour in your stock. You see how it's simmering right away. I'm going to put just enough to cover this rice. I would say on the initial about 4 ladles, shake gently. So the biggest thing with this is going to be using both hands. I have the Mickey hand right here. Using both hands to gently get the rice to move around. You don't really want to go like this or stir rigorously or any of that. You don't want to break these grains of rice up. You do not want to break these up. That's going to be the biggest mistake you'll ever make when you make risotto. So let it gently simmer. That's all you need to do is gently simmer. When you stir, just gently, using gentle agitation to get things to move around naturally instead of smashing into them. Because when these grains of rice get more cooked and more tender, they're going to break very, very easily. So we want to be careful. Again, keep your stock boiling hot. And we're looking for this to simmer and evaporate almost all the way. And then we're going to add more stock and more stock and more stock. Okay, so here we have our Ossobuco from off the smoker. This cooked for a total of 9 hours. 9 hours to cook this. Now, when I open this, you immediately just get that like beautiful barbecue flavor, but then it's like it's in an Italian village because you have all of that roasted garlic and the herbs and the pepperoncinis and the Parmesan just like blasting you as well. This is really this is going to be good. So what we need to do with this now is we need to make this look a little bit better. A lot of people would be like, oh yeah, just eat it like that. I'm sure it's fantastic like this right now, but we need to, what we're going to do is we're going to put this in a pan and we're going to glaze this in kind of like its natural juices, if you will, a little bit of the juices in the bottom of here, and a little bit of beef stock, and then we're going to mount that with butter and give this kind of like a natural glaze. So like the beef stock is going to act as almost like a vessel or like a bridge where the flavors from this are going to infuse into that beef stock. Then we're going to mount it with butter, thickening that natural juice, and it's going to beautifully coat this, going to make it look beautiful, and it's going to be nice and juicy when you eat it. It's going to look good, and it's definitely something that if you were in the restaurant, you would definitely do that with this. You would heat it up in some sort of liquid or have this hot holding somewhere in some liquid so it would stay nice and fresh. This will, if we don't glaze this and we don't leave it just like this, it'll just dry out completely after, you know, and this would not really look good on a plate right now. It really wouldn't. As many as people saying like, oh yeah, that looks great, I would eat it just like that. No, we need to give this a little zhuzh, a little more. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into a pan. Let me show you. Okay, so pan here, nice and wide to accommodate our Ossobuco. So we're gonna add, in this container I have beef stock and a tiny bit of balsamic vinegar. I'm gonna add the beef stock. I'm also going to add the roasted garlic paste from before with a little bit of the tomato in it. That's gonna help thicken this and bring this all together. I'm gonna put this on the stove. Okay, so just like this, everything is mixed in together. Now we're gonna reduce this down. Now with our risotto here, this is the first reduction of liquid. It has started to absorb, the rice has started to absorb the liquid. And what we need to do now is take this down a little bit further, and then we're gonna add more liquid and restart the process. Okay, so now the rice has gotten to the point where we're going to add more liquid. As you can see in the pan, there's a tiny bit of liquid, a tiny bit. We've let this slowly simmer, and the rice to absorb that liquid and for it to evaporate. You do not want to rush this process. You're gonna end up with some really starchy and goopy rice. You're not gonna end up with risotto if you do that. So now we're at the point where we want to add more liquid. So this time I added, instead of 4 ladles, I added 3 ladles of stock. So that would be about 12 ounces of stock. Now we're gonna put this on again and repeat the process. So now here I have the beef stock and everything reduced nicely. So what I'm gonna do now is we need to strain this because we have all those bits in there. And when it comes down to levels of refinement in culinary arts, refinement always means smoother, lighter, more air, or thin but flavorful, like sauce-wise. So basically what we need to do is strain this. Now the French would call this, because of the vinegar and the spices, French would call this as a sauce base a gastrique. Now a gastrique is something that you would typically use in a hollandaise, and it would be shallots, black pepper, and red wine vinegar or vinegar of some sort. That would be reduced and then added to the sauce to give it flavor. So you see here, after I've strained that, all those bits in there, we're getting those out because we want this to be a nice, smooth sauce. I don't want you to see any bits like that in this sauce. Beautiful liquid here, lots and lots of flavor in there, and really, really good base for our sauce. We'd always have a clean pan, because if I put this clean liquid now back into here with the bits, well, what's going to happen? I'm going to have bits in the liquid. The point of it is to be smooth and filtered, to have flavor without there being a bunch of sediment in the sauce. So now, liquid back into the bowl. You'll see it's not that much, but there's a lot of intense flavor there. Cold chicken stock and water. Chicken stock we use a lot just because it's very neutral flavor. And I happen to just have some lying around on the stove right now because of the risotto. So cold chicken stock and cornstarch in there. I'm going to take this back to the stove. And we're going to let this thicken up. Okay, so now I've got my beautiful sauce here. I'm going to gently place the smoked ossobuco into the sauce. Be careful not to break it up. This is very, very tender. Okay. Beautiful ossobuco in the sauce. We're gonna bring this back to the stove and we're gonna baste the sauce over this and let this kind of just meld in here, soak up some liquid, and really blend with the flavors. So here we have it, our ossobuco nicely glazed and soaking up our sauce. We're gonna let this sit on the stove now, keep it warm until our risotto is finished. Hey everybody, so while we're waiting on the risotto, we're going to make a garnish for the top of our plate. So I have here cornstarch, tapioca starch, maltodextrin, basil paste, and ground toasted pistachio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4 ounces of water. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to take this mixture and whisk this up here. Whisk this up. And I'm going to take this and put this on the stove, and we're going to bring this to a boil. Okay, so now what we have here is a, what we call a pistachio and basil goop. So all the starches have been activated since we had water in there, we brought it to a boil, we whisked it. And now the idea of this is to get this as thin as possible. You want to get this as thin as possible. Now the only way to do that is usually with a angled spatula. So you're going to take and spread this out as thin as you can get it. This starch here. Don't worry if there's a few holes or whatnot when you're first doing it. If you see pistachio in there, just get rid of that. As thin as you can get it. As it cools, it's going to gum up on you quite quickly. So you're going to want to work quickly with this. Because when it's cool, it's not going to stretch any further. As you can see, as it's cooling down and I'm trying to spread it out, it is making streaks. And the idea here is not to be perfect because this is going to dry out into like a thin film. What we're going to do is we're going to take this and place this in the oven. So I'm going to place this silpat in the oven at 215 degrees. You can use a dehydrator if you like. We're going to speed up the process here and put it in the oven at 215 degrees until this is a paper thin sheet. It'll be all glossed over and everything. Then you'll see what we're gonna do with it next. So into the oven, 215. I would say it's gonna take at least 2 to 3 hours to dry out, maybe even longer. Just go by eye. Okay, so our pistachio mixture has dried out, and when it dries out, you'll be able to flake it like this. It almost look like fish food, but it's not fish food. Little flakes. And then you take those and fry those in about 300 degree oil. Get a nice chip like this. These are really good, they taste great, and they'll be nice for our garnish. And add some nice texture it'll add some nice texture to the dish because we have a lot of soft textures from the rice and from the ossobuco. So this will add a nice little crunch and texture, kind of pick up the meal as you're eating it. And it does taste like roasted pistachios and basil, so that adds another dimension to our dish. Okay, so now it's time to start the finishing process for our risotto. And what we're going to do is first, in this one, it's going to be a little odd, not traditional. We're going to use the pistachio and Parmesan broth. Use about 4 ounces of that. And I'm going to bring this back to the stove for just a second. Okay, so we've got our risotto here, finishing up. With a good amount of heat going. You want to gently just work this around. You want to be careful not to break up those grains of rice. So I added the pistachio and Parmesan mixture, and as you can see, this is getting thick. Now we're going to add the cheese. Parmesan cheese. And here's where you want to move the pan a lot and not move the spatula as much. You want to almost envelope it on itself. Again, as you can see, I'm not being rough with it, just letting it kind of move around gently. Heat down. Here's where we want to give it a taste. See if our rice has the proper texture. Move it off the heat so we don't overcook it. See all the individual grains of rice not broken. A little bit more. This on low heat. Got a nice pop to the rice. It is not overcooked or mushy. I'm going to let this cook just a little bit more to make that rice all nice and tender. Now at this point you could add butter and melt that as well. And this one we're not using butter, we're going to let the pistachios and the oil from the pistachios kind of give it that flavor. Our risotto is now perfect, nice and thick, but still moving. It's exactly what we want. You don't want it over thick because as this cools on the plate, it's going to thicken naturally. So now it's time to plate up.